Growing up in Brooklyn in the 90s was, I mean, on one hand, it was fun because you're a kid, right? So I didn't have responsibilities like I do now. But I think also at the same time, that was a challenging period to live in Brooklyn, and especially East New York, Brooklyn, where there was higher rates of violence, drug abuse, and I just think like desperation. I joined the Boys Club actually through word of mouth. I had a couple of friends who were already members of the Harriman Clubhouse. They mentioned that they were going to the Boys Club, and they described how great it was, and the fact that you can play basketball there and play video games and get homework help and get all these things. I went one day to the Boys Club after school with my friends, and that opened me up to becoming a part of the Boys Club family. I got my first exposure to this space actually in like 2009. I was doing an internship with one of my uncles who owns a fleet of dollar vans. And at that time, there was a program that New York City TLC was running. They were running a program called Group Ride. And Group Ride was for dollar van drivers. It was supposed to help them basically expand their network around New York City. My uncles were participating in that program. And that was where I started to get a little bit more exposure to dollar vans from a business perspective. That was when I started getting the inklings of an idea of something that could be bigger than what dollar vans were at the time. I remember in 2016 speaking to my wife. She was my girlfriend at the time, but my wife and then a friend of mine who was also in the transportation space. There was a conversation that we had where it seemed like all the different experiences that I had and the ideas that I had along the way came together, and I had that light bulb moment of, oh wow, I could actually create a product that helps dollar van drivers optimize their businesses and essentially provide a more digital enabled experience for passengers. I just spent, every waking hour working on Dollaride outside of my full-time job. And, the struggle with that is that you only have 24 hours in a day. So I spent several years feeling like I wasn't making enough progress because I could only work on Dollaride for 3 or 4 hours a day. But eventually those hours, they add up, and, we were able to still build a prototype. Even though, I had 2 jobs, so to speak. Well, in New York City, and dollar vans are definitely a cultural phenomenon, but there's an existing network of drivers and fleet owners who've been a part of the industry for decades. So, that process first started with my uncles, and then eventually they introduced me to their competitors. But, with each person I got introduced to, I tried to ingratiate myself to them or become friends with them because I knew that they would open the door up to dozens or more drivers after that. When I started Dollaride, the core problem that we were trying to solve is access to transportation. And I started to realize that historically our transportation services around New York City that are provided by the MTA are also a reflection of decisions that have been made, from urban planning and policy making, that for folks who are essentially not rich but live in the outer boroughs and are typically people of color, we are subject to these decisions as opposed to being a part of them. So, we live in areas where there are fewer buses, fewer subway lines, and things like that. So, it occurred to me that dollar vans could be a solution to the gaps in our public transit system. So, electric vehicles and their impact on climate change actually became a solution that I saw dollar vans could take advantage of. And if they were to do so, it would actually enable the dollar vans to expand to other markets or to other neighborhoods, because they would ultimately have more money to fund their own expansion that could create a more vibrant transportation service for low-income New Yorkers. So, putting those things together and just having like the faith and the resolve to see it through is ultimately what Dollaride is doing today, and hopefully fighting, climate change and environmental racism, in ways that highlight the solutions that we already see in our backyards with people like the dollar van drivers. It's changed quite a bit, and it's always evolving. I started Dollaride at one point with a product idea that was basically just a mobile application. But then over the years, that has expanded from just being a mobile app to being a set of apps for riders and drivers, as well as a web application for fleet owners. And then now, more recently, we're moving from just software-based apps to now dealing with the physical environment where we are procuring and installing EV charging stations and buying electric vehicles and then leasing them back out to drivers. But what has stayed the same is the vision of making transportation accessible and affordable for everyday people. In the next 5 years, my vision for Dollaride is to enable a fully electric dollar van service around New York City. Definitely within 3 years, we're going to have 100 electric vehicles. But within 5 years, it should be a lot more, and they should be circulating Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx. But I think over 10 or 20 years, the grander vision is for electric dollar van or commuter van service to be in dozens of cities all around the country. It absolutely does. And that's probably the reason why I'm so motivated to pursue it today. I feel like I'm finally aligned with what I want to do and what I'm capable of doing. And that's really inspiring, and it keeps me up at night and helps me get up early in the morning. I have, I guess, 3 points of advice.
Okay.
1, work with people who are smarter than you and who inspire you. It's important to build a great team, and if you feel like you're learning from your team members, then that's probably a good sign you're working with the right people. The second piece of advice is to be courageous and be fearless. If you feel like you are working on an idea or working on something that kind of scares you because maybe you don't know how you'll get it done, or maybe it requires a breakthrough in technology or in your product, that's also a good sign. You want to be pushing the envelope and doing things that people haven't been done before. So lean into the fact that something might be scary and require some courage. And the third piece of advice is to not give up. Entrepreneurship is hard, and it's challenging in a lot of different ways, but the number one reason why people fail at building their businesses is because they stop trying. So keep moving forward, keep pressing forward, and eventually you'll reach your goal.